Good afternoon, everybody. We're getting started pretty much right on time. We waited a few minutes, but we are having Ralph with us again, who has been amazing for giving everybody a lot of excitement to get out there and take charge of your life after a stroke. Don't sit back and let life pass you by. Get back out there and do what you were doing, right, Ralph?
That's right.
We're going to get started with your next installment, I should say.
Okay. Yeah, as much as you can. I'm a big believer in trying to do whatever you can do, even if it's painfully slow and ugly looking at first. It doesn't, that's how it gets better.
That's right.
Anyway, today we're going to talk a little bit about arm and shoulder. Last time we did walking. Next time we're going to do a hand. And I'll probably talk a little bit about the wrist. I'm not a wrist specialist, but again, I'm not a PT. Why don't you flip to the next one? I'm not an occupational therapist either, but I do pay attention, and I have been to 4 or 5 of them myself, and I've also taken 4 or 5 stroke survivors to 2 or 3 more, and I'm constantly picking their brains. These are things that basically I've been either did myself or was shown, and I don't believe that you can do any harm doing them yourself. A lot of what I do is help people who've run out of insurance and no longer or never had insurance and never had a physical or occupational therapist, or ran out of insurance and no longer have one because we're kind of on our own at that point. So go ahead, next. Okay, before I talk about a normal progression, there is a normal progression. I'm just going to mention, I didn't do a special slide on shoulder subluxation or frozen shoulder. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure what is the difference. I think there's a small difference, but I also see people, not necessarily medical doctors, but a lot of people seem to use them interchangeably. I even had, and when I had a frozen shoulder, according to the orthopedist, other people were calling it sublux. So anyway, not to confuse a confusing subject even more, we're not really going to deal with shoulder subluxation in today, because it's kind of a subject on its own, and there seem to be different issues with the shoulder and with frozen or sublux shoulder, and they're best dealt with by a medical doctor or physical therapist, or somebody who can actually examine you and see what you have going on. Okay, there are a couple of things that I am going to say about a sublux shoulder. And that is that you should never, go ahead and go back, you should never move into any pain zone. You don't ever, in anything you're doing, want to move into any pain. You know, when I was moving my shoulder up, I'd hit a pain zone, and I would just stop below it, and I'd work all the way into it. I would push just into it, just a little bit into it, but nothing like real pain. And eventually it went up. You can do a lot of harm if you push into pain. You can cause your shoulder to be worse. On the other hand, I've heard 20 times from people who said, my physical therapist just grabbed my shoulder and said, this is going to really hurt, and somehow pulled on it or manipulated it in some way that it healed it. That's real interesting to me, and it kind of ignores the whole pain thing. Anyway, if you have a shoulder subluxation, any of the things that we say today, you should think about that subluxation and think about any pain If you have a physical therapist or orthopedist, you talk to them, see what of these things you might be appropriate for you to do. It was crazy because when I had mine, they told me I had to stop like going crosswise, but they let me pull on different in other ways. Of course, I had shake, and I was told that the ones going crosswise were what got rid of the shake. So I was really irritated to have to stop for 4 or 6 weeks of until it supposedly healed. And then they let me do whatever, and nobody did anything. I mean, I just kept pushing it up, but they didn't do anything. We waited 6 weeks. And when I came back, I was in a small town, and I was going to of outpatient physical therapy. It was part of a medical facility, and the orthopedist was up the hall from the occupational therapist. So when she referred me to him, I came back and told her I had a frozen shoulder. She rolled her eyes. I don't think she believed it, but she had to work with this guy. She'd been working with him for some years. She may even still be working with him 14 years later. So she did what she followed his directions. I didn't think so because at that time I was up to the blue band, and she weighed about 100 pounds, and she would hold on to the blue band and have me pull on her, and she was having to hold on to the cabinets to keep me from pulling her across the room. They tell me I got a frozen shoulder. Anyway, enough about me. So there is a normal progression. This is according to the books and physical therapists. Everybody will tell you that, it starts with your shoulder, grosser muscles to finer muscles. Starts with your shoulder, your arm, your elbow, your wrist, and your hand. Your shoulder will come back before your hand. Mine went exactly the opposite. My hand started moving. I got it going fairly quickly, and I built on it. I didn't really have any major wrist issues. I used a hammer, but I didn't have the whole thing where some people, when their fingers bend depending on the position that they have their wrist in, and you have to be able to get your fingers to go straight in either position, not curl in. My elbow was a bit of a problem. I had pain right where my deltoid muscle connected. I don't think it had anything to do with anything other than the stroke. And my shoulder was the absolute last to come. And like I said, I had shoulder pain the whole time for 6 months or so. I don't think it was a frozen shoulder. I think it's just out of place post-stroke shoulder pain. A lot of people complain about it. But again, I'm not a medical doctor. Here's the deal. It doesn't always go that way, like it didn't go that way in my case. So what would have happened if I'd have listened to and said, oh, well, the normal progression is shoulder, arm, elbow, wrist, hand. So I shouldn't work on this hand until I get my shoulder back. Well, it took me over a year to get the shoulder back, and I was doing pretty good with my hand in a few months. And so the moral of the story is it's not always the case. Work what works for you. If something's moving, work it. If something else isn't moving, work it too. But don't let one thing, the concept that, your shoulder comes back first before your hand, don't let that stop you from working on your hand. One of the things that happens to a lot of stroke survivors, I'm reading the word yawning and I want to yawn, is, well, first of all, it seemed to me I yawned more and I hiccuped more after my stroke. Hiccups and both of them kind of went away. But I would yawn and my arm would just drift all the way up. Now, this is when I couldn't raise my thumb off of my lap. My arm is going almost straight up. And then it comes back down, and I can't budge it again, no matter what I did. I called it voting. My wife would say, what are you voting for? And I made up all kinds of political things for about a month until I ran out of stuff to vote for. Anyway, there isn't any way that I know to turn that into controlled motion. It's a reflex. I've been told that by 2 neurologists. almost everybody in the stroke group said, oh, my arm's moving, so maybe I can make it move. And no one is, I've talked to 10 people who said they tried to harness it and they couldn't. One person claimed that he was able to, but he never could explain to me how he did it, and therefore I kind of doubted based on the lack of explanation and the overwhelming numbers the other way, plus 2 neurologists. Anyway, so enjoy it while you can. The one thing that it helped me to know was when my arm went all the way up, I knew it was a brain injury. You know, when you first have a stroke and you're paralyzed, as they say, you know, you're thinking there's something wrong with your body, and it's the brain connection. So when you yawn and have a reflex reaction, they aren't always going up. Some people touch towards their face. If you have that kind of reaction, just know that your arm is okay. What you need to work on is the connection between your brain and your arm. So go ahead and next. So these are things that we're going to talk about today. I don't have much on counter tricks. I need to shoot some videos on things you can do on the counter and in bed. All of these are things that help remove gravity from the equation. One of the things that's working against you in stroke recovery is actually stroke strikes all the anti-gravity muscles. Who knew that until this year? But that's what happens. So counteracting gravity becomes difficult. So you can, if you put your hand on a counter and you can rub, you don't have to lift it up. You're getting some movement without going against gravity. You can go forwards and backwards. You can go left and right. You know, we're going to talk about wax on, wax off, but that's usually when you've got your shoulder up. I'm talking about where you can just literally lay your arm out and move it side to side on a counter. You can do similar things in a bed. You can lay in a bed on your back and do snow angels, and you don't have to hold your hand up like I'm doing now from keeping it from going forwards or backwards because it's on the bed. The same thing is, we'll talk a little bit later about, same thing with a wall. What you're doing is you're eliminating gravity from the equation. One other way to do that is, and I'm going to shoot some counter tricks in bed stuff. I've already got some, a lot of my videos already talk about assisting with your other hand. In terms of your shoulder, one of the simplest things, and I'll do it a little higher or I'll stand up just a bit, is you can take and cup your hand under your elbow. You want to do it above those elbow bones so it doesn't slip down. And you can just literally just push your arm up. I've taught people how to do this in a wheelchair. Of course, one of them insisted on doing it below her elbow, and she basically bent her elbow the whole time rather than raising the shoulder here. This is what you want to do. You want to, increase this angle as you go. Okay, so real quickly, just some of the things we're going to talk about are abducting. I'm not going to go into any of these because there's actually a slide on each one. Abducting, drawing circles at your side. Weight bearing is real important to your shoulder, just like it is to your leg, because it tells your brain you want to use it. Corner push-ups, wax on, wax off. Then there's the old reliable 3 shoulder shrugs, shoulder rolls, and scapula pinches. Ooh, it's scapular. Scapula is the bone. When it's a adjective, it has an R on the end. Anyway, and then I'm going to show you the dowel trick and a rope and pulley trick. And I have videos on every one of these except corner push-ups on my YouTube channel. So next. And that's what my YouTube channel looks like, and the name of it down below. And this is just a list of playlists, and what you can see is I've categorized it. Why, there's one over there in the lower left called Stroke Shoulder, and that one's and Stroke Walking Better. So I've got them categorized by when there's one on ankle. There's also some on some of these meetings. If you look on the upper left, there's one for the 3 previous health effects, presentations over there in the blue. Anyway, so I've got a lot of this stuff on my YouTube channel. However, go ahead and flip. There are lots of other resources out there. I'm not the only one doing this. When I had my stroke, I couldn't find a single video on YouTube. I already had a YouTube channel because I'm a video professional, so I was using my YouTube channel for my demo reel and to put up work to get more work. But I could not find anything on stroke recovery. It was 14 years ago. There's quite a bit now. So here we got a couple of big players, Kaiser Permanente and Johns Hopkins, shoulder instability, shoulder subluxation, rehab exercises. There you go. If you best to go to a doctor and a PT, but if you can't, you know, a lot of people don't have insurance, and we have to read stuff and figure it out for ourselves. So next, just want to flip through these and show you there's lots of stuff out there. I found all these inside of 5 minutes a couple days ago when I was putting this together. So there's somebody's Precision Well-Being group. That was a pretty good video, and you explained the whole anatomy of the shoulder and everything. It wasn't particularly stroke-based, but it dealt with the same issues. So, and there's Sabo, who makes Sabo Glove and Sabo Flex and various stroke recovery products. They've got a pretty good website. They've got some exercises specifically aimed at stroke. So next, American Heart Association. Who knew? Last time I looked, they didn't have any videos. I guess it's everybody's trying to jump on the video bandwagon. I think that's a good thing. So there's some, that's a post-stroke exercise, and that's using one hand to help the other. If that one arm, if your affected arm won't go over, you can grab it with this one, and you can get the range of motion. Whenever you assist with your other hand, what you need to do is think about moving the one that won't move, so you can try and establish connections. If you don't do that, you're basically moving your arm with your other arm. It's called mental imagery or mental practice. It's actually a neuroplastic technique. Boy. And there's Dr. Tara Tobias, and she's kind of in a class of her own. She's a neuro-trained physical therapist that she goes into shoulders and other things. And I find her videos to be excellent, and she's got a couple hundred of them. And this one she's referring to, this is number 3 in a series, and I just happened to catch this when I screen grabbed it. It's talking about a previous video, number 2 in the series. I think this is 3. Look, she's got a big X through the elbow. If the elbow, what she's doing is saying, don't not work on your hand or your shoulder because your elbow doesn't work. She's kind of reinforcing what I said earlier. Maybe I stole it from her. Work what works. Don't let this supposed progression stand in the way. And she's even using the word progression. Okay, so next. So now we're going to start talking about some of the things that I listed before. This is basic abduction. I was training for a triathlon when I was 45, and I had a little old lady pull out in front of me on my racing bike, and I was going over 25 miles an hour, and I T-boned her, and I broke my shoulder. They took me to the hospital, and the x-ray didn't reveal it, but an MRI a couple days later, when I couldn't move my arm at all, did. And so I stopped. I had to stop. I couldn't move my thumb away from my thigh. So I just, instead of going to the YMCA at 5 o'clock, I cut myself some slack and got up at 6 and did about an hour of abducting and circles. And abducting is basically moving your hand away. Anything abducting means moving, and adducting means towards. Abducting means away from the body. So this is something that's kind of hard to do in the beginning after a stroke. So the one on the left, that might be as far as you get. In the beginning with my broken shoulder, that was as far as I got. And eventually I got to about the distance of the right one, and eventually I got farther and farther till I got to be about level. And we're going to talk about when you get level, because it's really hard to go above level, and there's a reason for it that I found out in the last couple weeks. I love what I do because I'm always finding out new stuff. So go ahead next. So do abducting, but don't move into any kind of pain zone. I found it wasn't so much a pain zone issue there. It was a matter of just couldn't get it up high enough to get into the pain zone. The other thing I did, I don't really know. I don't think anybody told me to do these two exercises for my broken shoulder. But I fell into them somehow. Doesn't matter how. So the other one is drawing circles with your index finger. You can kind of see my index finger sticking out there. And what you want to do is you don't want to hit your leg, but you want to draw a circle. And you want to go in both directions. I did about 100 of each, 100 clockwise and 100 counterclockwise. When I tell people, you know, that's what I did. One of the things I did to rehab my shoulder, they go, oh, I could do that. And then I tell them, well, I did it every hour on the hour, about 10 times a day, about 2,000. And that gets their attention. It's all about the repetitions. Now, I'm not expecting anybody out there to do 2,000. I'm, you know, a bit of a maniac, but that's a whole nother story. The thing I like about circles, and I've confirmed this with physical and occupational therapists, is anytime you're drawing a circle with something, you're using a lot of muscles all at the same time, because the circular, you know, a lot of what we think about the way we move is in straight lines. And when you draw a circle, you're using a lot of different muscles. And one of the things that stroke does is it throws off, you have a natural tone. People use tone to mean spasticity, excess tone. They're kind of interchangeable, but they're slightly different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the natural tone. And like when you do a curl, you got your bicep pulling up and your tricep letting go. On the way down, your biceps letting go and your triceps moving it down. And there's a natural balance between those two muscles. It exists, similar relationships exist between lots of muscles in your body. So when you draw a circle, you're really you're engaging a lot of different muscles, and in order to draw it nice and round, you have to get that balance back. So if you draw a circle, like in my videos, this is a screen grab from my one of my videos. In that, I point out that they will be triangles in the beginning. They'll be real jerky. You won't draw a circle. You know, and I'm drawing circles because I did this, I shot the video 10 years after my stroke. And so back to the idea of just do it no matter what it looks like. It'll get better. If you don't do it, it won't get better. End of story. So circles are good. I went to the orthopedist after they found my shoulder was broken. I asked him what I should be able to do. He said, it was my left shoulder, my affected shoulder, of course, too. Of course, I hadn't had the stroke yet. He said, take your other hand, he said, put it on the back of your neck, like that. And okay, and he said, that's what you should be able to do with your other hand. And he said, I'll see you in 3 weeks. I said, I'll be putting that hand on the back of my neck, just like that. And he said, no, you won't. And I said, yes, I will. And I got up every morning and did an hour of circles and abducting, and I went in 3 weeks later, and I put my hand flat on the back of my neck, and his eyeballs got really big, and he said, how did you do that? And I told him how I did it. So it's back to repetitions. A lot of the stroke recovery stuff, it mostly comes down to attitude. I'm blessed in some ways, cursed in others, to be a maniac, because sometimes it's nice to let go, and you can't let go of things, but that's a whole nother story too. So go on to the next one. Weight bearing, I touched on this earlier. they'll tell you in terms of walking to weight bear on your legs, stand at the counter. You know, even if you can't walk, you stand at the counter. There's something that your brain recognizes when weight is put on to a leg or an arm and shoulder. It's maybe like the same way that weight training is different than aerobic training. It works muscles differently. There's something going on with the brain. I'm not a neurologist, so I can't explain it. But I can tell you that it's really important, and that, for example, this last Tuesday, I had an occupational therapist on my weekly meeting, and she brought it up. And so how the weight bearing is important, she said basically the same thing. It sends signals to your brain that you want to use it. I went, great, checkbox. Something else that I've been told a couple times, confirmed by a real master's degree occupational therapist. So that got moved over into the I'm pretty sure to the I'm completely sure category. So one of the things, you can do this from a wheelchair. You'll need something lower. Actually, I just remembered that. I had somebody, I mentioned this to somebody in one of the groups, and they said, I'm in a wheelchair, and I said, can you get down on the floor? They said, yeah, kind of. So what I did was I got a step stool out of my kitchen, got on my knees, and did weight bearing on the step stool. So, you know, my whole thing is like, don't let something become a problem, adapt something. You know, in this case, I spent a lot of my time adapting things for other folks like that. And I actually shot a video of that and posted it. And hopefully she benefited from it. One of the things that Shauna Young, the OT, said last Tuesday that I also knew because I shot this video 2-3 years ago is that you can put a lot of weight on your affected arm. That's my affected left arm. So I picked on the right, I'm pushing down with both. Yeah, if your balance is dicey, you know, you might want to push just forwards and backwards. When you go to one hand, like on the right, you know, one of the things you can do is like lean into it. That's really good. However, you know, if you don't have much balance and you lean into something too far, you might go over. Not good. Okay, and another thing you can do that's real good is once you start leaning over, you can kind of draw circles with your shoulder, or you can go left, right, and forwards and backwards, or try and draw circles with that shoulder. All those things are going to move different muscles, and the weight bearing is going to tell your brain, hey, he wants to use that arm. All right, next. So, you know, you never know what order to put these in. I got like 17, 18 things. I don't know what order to put them in. You obviously can't wax on, wax off until you can, well, I suppose you could do it at a table in a wheelchair. You can't do it until you can do a little teeny bit of basic grabbing, although you don't really need to grab that towel too much. If you're pushing down on it, it won't slip out from under your hand. Just the slightest little bit of grab will keep it in place. And of course, wax on, wax off is from the Karate Kid, and it refers to cars. Basically, what you do is you just draw circles again in both directions with the cloth. You're using the cloth, like I was talking about on counter. You could put just a cloth under you, sit in a wheelchair and just slide your hand on a table and a cloth. You're using the cloth to get rid of friction, which makes it easier. It's like getting rid of gravity. It make it easier. If you make it easier, then you have a chance of getting through the range of motion. When you can't overcome gravity, you can't make it, you can't lift your shoulder all the way up. You can't make it through the range of motion. And what you want to do is, the first thing you want to do is get your body moving through the entire range of motion, whether you have strength or not, because you don't want any of the tendons and ligaments shortening. You want to work all those muscles. The muscles will shorten too, I believe. That's not a medical statement. That's my opinion or belief, but I'm pretty sure it's correct. So you want to get movement going to keep everything elongated the way it was. You don't want contracture. So wax on, wax off is a really good thing. Actually, a lot of these techniques are, I did a lot of like house cleaning. Well, you'll see. You know, spouses love it when people get involved in a home therapy program that involves a lot of uh, cleaning therapy. Anyway, next. These are really basic, and again, you don't know what order to put them, all these things in, but these are real basic. You can do them in a wheelchair. I'm sitting in a chair there, and basically you got shrugs. You want to go straight up and down. You're not hunching. You're keeping, that string is attached to the top of your head and the sky hook above you, or keeping that head nice and straight, and you just want to go up and down. You can also do them affected only. In the beginning, you're best off to do them both because your unaffected side will help your affected side move. It's called bilateral therapy. When our brains are bilateral and we're real used to doing things the same, like scrubbing yourself or washing your hair, you do the same thing with both hands. So it's something your brain's real used to doing, and you can use it in your recovery by using the strong side or the teaching side to help the weak side or the healing side. So in the beginning, I just go straight up and down, and eventually you can learn to do them with your affected shoulder only, keeping that head and neck straight. The other one's rolls. And again, you keep your head nice and straight, looking forward, and you roll forward, and then you roll backwards. Try and get them nice and smooth and even and round. The last one there is scapular pinches. This is one of the best ones for shoulder subluxation. Your scapula, that's basically your shoulder, your wing bone. It kind of torques out. Mine was out 3/4 of an inch. I got it back to within under 1/4 inch by doing these scapular pinches. Again, you're looking straight forward, head's up straight, and you just go back. You just try and touch those shoulder blades together in the back. Feels like you are, but you're not. And so those are all real good. They can be done anywhere, wheelchair, whatever. You don't have to be standing or walking or anything. Next. Next is the dowel trick. I'm always a little hesitant to recommend this. Not so much to women, but I worry about guys because guys always have that all-in mentality. I know about it because I am a guy. I had my stroke because I had that all-in mentality. However, that's another story and a really long story. The reason that I'm hesitant is you don't want to push into any pain. What you're doing here with the dowel trick is, I actually went out and bought a dowel, and a friend of mine taped it all up all fancy, so it looks like a therapy device. It's a $3 dowel from Home Depot or Lowe's with some tape on it. And what you're doing, now one thing you have to be able to do is, this holds some people back because they have some shoulder motion, but they don't have their hand yet. So you have to be able to hold on to the dowel with your affected hand, and then you take your unaffected hand and you push it up. One of the reasons I like this is the dowel is $3. It can also be done with your single point cane, a golf umbrella, any kind of umbrella other than a folding umbrella that folds down to fit under your car seat. An old broom handle that you got in the garage, you can cut it down, or maybe you can deal with it the length it is. So it's a trick that doesn't involve a lot of money or any equipment. And again, it took me over a year to be able to do that again without the dowel. And I kept pushing it up. We'll get to this in just a sec. You kind of hit a wall right when you get to even. And I just kept working it there, working it just below, just into that, just to where I felt the pain. And what I found was eventually where I felt the pain slowly went up. And I never did any harm to myself. And I did get my shoulder back. Like I said, the Limitation of this is you have to be able to grab onto the dowel. One thing that I've done or taught people or shown people how to do is you can kind of cup it over the top. If you can't grab it like this, you can kind of cup it over the top, and if you can do that and just barely hold on to it, then you can still push it up. Whenever you're moving something with your other hand, or in this case a dowel connected to your other hand, you want to think about lifting it. So the whole time I'm pushing it up, I'm still trying to lift it with my brain at the same time, trying to build those connections. Go ahead, next. So I said I'd talk about, I'm making a grimace, bad acting. Um, What happens is when you get about even, and I've seen this with at least a half a dozen people whose arms I've worked on in person with them, you push to about here and they'll start making a face. Always, if you're helping anybody, look into their eyes. Eyes never lie. People will tell you, no, that doesn't hurt, when it does hurt. They, particularly guys, they think they have to be macho and strong about everything. So I learned this early on, and I look in the eyes. The eyes don't lie. When the eyes start squinting, there's a problem. So whenever I'm doing anything that could involve pain with another stroke survivor, I'm staring into their eyes, because that's my gauge, my barometer. So you get about here, and it just won't go any higher. Well, there's a reason for that. And like I said, I learned it last week from Shauna. And that is when you raise your arm this much, if you go back here and feel it, your scapular bone isn't moving. Oh yeah, when you go right above half, what happens? If you put your other hand back there, what you'll see is your scapula, which normally is just sitting like this. You can raise your arm to here, but when you go above it, it starts rotating. And those muscles, so when you get to here, you're having to engage and train a whole new set of muscles that weren't involved in getting it up to even, or they were minimally involved. I better be careful here because I've only studied anatomy on with other stroke survivors, a retired PT, and Dr. Google. So, but like I said, an occupational therapist told me this. So and I can feel it in my own body. So you just have to go slow, stay out of the pain, and keep working it, and realize that it happens to everybody. Gets kind of stuck right here. So it'll happen to you. Go ahead, next. This is another way to raise your arm. This actually will work. It has advantages and disadvantages. So you can put your hand through that loop. You could actually make that loop have a slip knot. So even if you couldn't grasp, first of all, if you put your hand in a loop and your fingers are clutched at all, because you can't move them, the rope's not going to go back out around. So it'll settle on your wrist and you can pull it up. The disadvantage is you need some kind of a system. I'm using a pulley here. However, you could see that hole that's drilled in that board. The rope could just go through there and you wouldn't necessarily need a pulley. So this one involves some, setting up and mechanics that you may not be able to do. You might need a spouse or friend or something to help you with it. But you don't have to be able to grab onto the dowel quite as much. And like I said, you can make a slip knot or, over there in that loop and put it around your wrist and tighten it up and then just raise it. Again, no pain. You got to be real careful with this one because you can just pull on that rope and that arm will go up. So you got to be real careful about when you get close to that pain zone. You have much more of a sense of it when you're, and this is in my garage. I don't need it. I built one for demonstration purposes, but I also tried it out, and I felt like when I used the dowel, I have much more of a sense of pushing up more than just when you pull that rope. It's real easy to pull that rope and have the arm go up. So if you have pain, be real careful pulling on that rope too hard or too fast around the pain zone. Go ahead, next. Okay. It wouldn't be a presentation by me if we didn't talk about a couple of things. This is one of them, core. Now, I've always suspected that your shoulder was a lot more connected to your core than I'd ever been told or taught. And I actually I asked Shauna Young in advance of our meeting about it so that I wasn't asking her something she wasn't comfortable. And so we talked about it, and I asked her about this. And basically, I have a friend, John Loomis, I'm going to mention him again in a minute, who basically said one time in a conversation we were having that you need to think of the shoulder like a crane that holds up the whole rest of your arm. And that crane is supported by your core. And Shauna confirmed that, having a strong core is essential. Well, it's essential to everything. It's more essential to walking than anybody ever teaches you. When they ask people, what would you tell yourself if you could go take a time machine back and run into yourself 3 months after your stroke? What would you tell yourself that you know now that you didn't know then? And I always say the importance of core. Work on core. Nobody told me about it. I discovered it through personal trainer and a few other things, picking PT's brains. And then once I got kind of onto it, and I'm not saying I invented core, I'm just saying in my own journey and discovery, I kind of had to discover it for myself. So here's some examples of some things. Long lever and short lever. Short is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're both done to an 8 count. And long is you don't bend your elbow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I know we got stroke survivors out there going, there's no way in heck I can do that. We've moved past some of the basics, and I'm now moving into some things that are you should be able to do, progress. Go ahead and flip through these. So I just demonstrated short lever and long lever again. You can do these in a wheelchair. They actually are a good core exercise, believe it or not. I worked with somebody who had ataxia, and when she put her arm up, in the beginning, her whole body would swing because of the weight of her arm. She had no core or trunk strength. And after doing these for a few months, she'd put her arm up. She still had ataxia. Her arm would still float a little bit up there, but it wouldn't wave like she was waving a flag. She had control of it because she had control of her trunk and her core. Go ahead, next. And this is symmetry. Yeah, I know. Now we've got those same people going, well, I'm not going to be able to lift my arm up, my affected arm level like that, or in front of me, or go ahead and flip to the next one. There are 4 positions here, and it doesn't matter where you go. You know, you got by your side, straight out, straight up, and straight in front of you. And you can just go, you know, any old way you want. There's no order. You just repeat endlessly. One of the things I like about this is you can look down your arms and you can make sure that you're holding that affected arm up, even with the other. I'm a big believer in symmetry, so I'm calling this symmetry because what you want to do is have those arms level. You don't want to, like, if you're with your eyes closed, you don't want to do this. Have this one be level and your affected arm be down here because you don't know where it is. It's called proprioception. That's what you're working on. Proprioception is like knowing where, I guess I could open my eyes now. Proprioception is like knowing where your arm is in 3D space. And that's important to learn. Not so much with arms, but it's really important with feet. You know, if you want to be able to put your feet down without looking at them, you kind of got to know where you're throwing them and where they're landing. And I think that symmetry is really important. I always look to my unaffected side to know what my affected side should be doing, and I kind of wanted to do the same thing, look the same way, be in the same position, not droopy, not anything. And this is a real good arm and shoulder exercise that works on symmetry as well as range of motion. And when you get good at it, you can put those little 2-pound or one or 2-pound wrist weights on. I got some that are filled with sand that are real nice and soft and cushy if you want to build up some strength. I'm not a big believer in weights. I think you can do just fine moving through the range of motion. You can build up strength. But if you like that sort of thing and you have them, you can wear some wrist weights. Okay, next. Oh, and we got the 3 Ps here: push-ups, planks, and punching. This is just push-ups. And I'm showing adaptive push-ups where you're on your knees. A real push-up, you're on your toes. So you'll see it in a minute, like a plank. Yeah, there it is. I can do those. I can do them as push-ups like that, but they're pretty hard for most people, especially if you're trying to build up a shoulder. If you go back one just for a sec, on the right there, I'm doing them one-handed with only my affected hand. And you have to be real careful. I didn't bring the picture over in my video. I actually show putting a king-size goose down pillow down and put it under your face in case, because early on that arm will feel like it's going to collapse. Actually, if you dip down far enough, it will collapse in the beginning. So you got to kind of know where that point is, or you can put some kind of foam or something under your face in case it does collapse. I'm a big believer in safety. Okay, next. So on the left, we've got a basic plank. That's going to be good for your shoulder in a lot of ways because it's weight bearing. It's good for your core. Core is good for holding that shoulder up. There are 2 ways to do a plank. You can do them more like a regular push-up. They're actually harder on your elbows. I always thought it was easier, but physical therapists told me no, they're harder and do more for you on your elbows. But if you go up onto your hands and you do a plank, you can actually do it on your elbows some. I'd done planks for a long time before a physical therapist showed me, like rocking forwards and backwards and rocking left and right. When you rock into that affected side, boy, you're really doing a lot of good. Again, don't rock over too far. Know where your collapse point is, because you can collapse. And the last of the 3 Ps there is punching. And punching is good for a lot of reasons. Going forward is one of the more difficult things to do. And so punching works for that. It's basically what it is. It's also an explosive exercise in that you're trying to punch. You're trying to do it quickly. And explosive things are difficult after a stroke. That's what butt kickers are about, when you try and kick your heel into your butt. It's a fast, explosive thing, and it's hard to get that fast motion back after a stroke. So these are real good for that. The other thing I realized when I was shooting this video is if you start with your fists like this and you punch and you rotate, you're rotating at 90 degrees. And you have to keep doing that. And so it becomes a coordination drill on top of a range of motion thing. Coordination drills are, I can actually feel that in my brain. The coordination drills are good because, well, the reason I feel it in my brain is it takes extra brain processing power. Anytime you can push yourself is a good thing. I'm talking about neurologically, and I have asked 2 neurologists this, and they all say, I said, I'm pushing myself really hard. Is that a good idea? And they say, yes. I said, how do I know if I'm pushing myself too hard? And they both said, your brain will let you know. It'll shut down. And I found that to be true. Okay, next. So some more advanced techniques are kind of like back to like snow angels on the bed. For example, here's my friend John Loomis again. Let me stand up just a little bit. And one of the things that's hard to do is with your elbow there, abduct out. And you want to move that, you're going to want to move that elbow, especially in the beginning. You're not going to be able to just swing it like that, like I'm doing now. So my friend John Loomis made a video, and he actually strapped his elbow to his ribs with a gait belt. And I thought that was pretty clever. And then when I had Shauna on last week, I don't have a ball here, but she suggested putting a ball under there. I grabbed a napkin And guess what? If I move that too much, that napkin's going to fall out. So a ball or something can keep you do the same thing as the strap. I would say it's better because you have to be mindful about maintaining some pressure on that ball. Whereas when you use a gate belt, it's locked in. On the other hand, a gate belt might be exactly what you need if you don't have enough control to hold the ball there. Again, you always want to do something, if there's a better way but you can't do it, you strap your arm so that you can do it, because then if you do it some, you'll get to where you can do it with a ball, and then you'll get to where you can do it without anything, and that would be the whole point. Another thing, these are not so much anti-gravity tricks, but they're keeping things in the same plane. So what we were doing there was keeping that shoulder straight while we abducted and adducted that shoulder, the arm. Other things you can do is sometimes your arm wants to go all crazy. That's what happens when you do that other exercise. So you can stand next to the wall and you can raise your arm and up against the wall, and the wall will keep it in the same plane. That's called blocking. What you're doing in this case is you're trying to isolate and work the specific muscles that are a problem and not let some of those other muscles that want to take over get engaged. We get a lot of other muscles. When the muscles don't work, the brain will tell the body to use other muscles to try and accomplish the task. Early on in my stroke, I'd be doing something with my hands, and I'd look down and I'd have my unaffected toe hooked around the table or a chair or something, and I'm like, I'm using my leg to do, to hold on to, do stuff with my hands. It was crazy. So you can do that. There's another one where they have you do a rag so you don't have any friction, and you can move it up and down the wall or left and right. You've taken the same thing that we talked about on the table and you turned it vertical and you put gravity into it. If that's too much, Shauna had the tip, take an ironing board or something and put it at a 45-degree angle and do half gravity. Great idea. I like people that adapt. I'm an adapter myself. See, I always think if something doesn't work, how am I going to make it work? No, you can go ahead. That's fine. And so you can also find on YouTube, you can find adaptive, not adaptive, sorry, I got off on adaptive, muscle isolation and blocking exercises. On the left, there's some that are specific to stroke. It says after stroke. On the right, we've just basically got a young man for Livestrong, Lance Armstrong's outfit, and he's just doing some exercises. Of course, those weights are probably way too big for anybody in stroke, but again, you have to learn how to adapt. You can do, if you see something like this with the weights and you can hardly move your arm, just try and do the same thing without the weights. You want the range of motion first. That's the most important. And so many people, they try and strap on a bunch of weights and do it, and I think it limits them from getting the range of motion. Once you got the range of motion, you can always add the weight. This is my philosophy, my personal opinion. So there are a lot of resources out there, and it would not be a presentation by me if we didn't talk about therapies all around you, which is the concept of just using what you got to do whatever you can, no matter how long it takes you or how ugly it looks. So here are a couple of quick examples. One day I came home from PT. They had me lifting cones off of the top shelf and placing them on the counter, and then when it was done, I put them back up. And I got home that night and I was taking the vitamins down, and I said, this is no different than the therapy cones. So I started taking the vitamins. So I have about 7 or 8, 6, something like that. And I started taking them all down and putting them all back up 5, 10 times instead of just once. It was just, so when I went to get the vitamins out, it took me 5 minutes instead of 1 minute. I did it all with my affected hand. I opened the cabinet. I pull them down. I don't show here. I'm just pulling them down because I'm talking about the cones, but also once I get them down, I open them with my affected hand. Then I pour them into my affected hand and put them in my mouth. That's not the easiest thing to do. One of the things that's good to do is practice touching your nose, because a lot of people get a lot of shake. I don't have much shake today near my face. Anyway, again, therapy's all around you. Take the vitamins with your affected hand, drink with your affected hand. In fact, I need a drink. Now there's a wax on, wax off opportunity if ever I saw one. There's a whole lot of wax on, wax off opportunity right there. Are you going to make it through an entire car wash with your affected hand on week 2? Nope. Do what you can. Switch back and forth. Once you give up on your affected hand, don't give up on it forever. Do some with your stronger hand, and a minute later, put it back over there. Try and put them in both. You can try to do what you do in the shower when you wash your hair and when you scrub your body. Get that bilateral thing going. I mean, your neighbors aren't going to critique your car washing technique as they drive by. And then here's I found that some of the things that were really good for my shoulder were holding on to things. I'm vacuuming with my affected hand there. I found lawn mowing was really good because I had to steer the lawnmower. So I'm having to push and pull with both shoulders. And my hands are on something, so there's no concern about holding them up or anything. I also found driving, once I got back to driving, that driving was really good. In fact, I lived out in the country, and when no one was coming, I would drive with my affected hand only. When I saw the cement truck coming at me, that old right hand went right back to the wheel, and because I wasn't going to hit any cement truck or let one hit me, or I wouldn't be talking to you today. And on the right is just, it was in the slide. It's kind of pure showing off, I suppose. But because they'll tell you as a stroke survivor, don't get up on a ladder. But and I tell you, when as you get better, you can try to accomplish more. And I'll tell you what, holding something in place with a level. I have a level. No, I don't have a level on that one. Sometimes I have a level and a drill. And standing on the ladder and leaning out, boy, you're using a lot of brain to do that. Okay, next. And this is the last one. Just have some gardening pictures. Over there again, the rototiller, real good like the lawnmower. You got to hold on to it and steer it, and it'll hits a root and it'll buck at you and everything. Real good, and unknown. It's sometimes good, especially once you get advanced, to do something like rototilling or something that you can like hit a root and you'll have to just deal with it, because then you have things coming at you that's the way you used to deal with things. Things would come at you, your brain would deal with it, you respond, and you were good. Okay, so that's it.